Hello, my name is Kelly Buckler. My story is called Hiraeth. It is a novella about a young man named Luca, and it opens with him committing a murder, then goes back in time to talk about his relationship with his boyfriend, who is a man called Heaven. He's a pianist, and he commits suicide in the 5th chapter of this book. And then it goes back to talk about the murder again from a different perspective in chapter 6, and ends with chapter 7, which is back with Luca's perspective. I will be reading chapters 5 and 7, not reading chapter 6. But the story doesn't go in chronological order, so it's not that important to know what happened before this. But I wanted to include a brief trigger warning because this first scene that I'm reading does include the description of a suicide. It's not very detailed or long, but it is there, so viewer's discretion is advised. So yeah, I'll get started. Chapter 5, The Fall of Heaven. Heaven's eyes offered tears to the sky, his face glowing with the darkness around him. An angel has wings. Why would an angel fall unless there was reason to do so? A reason to let your feathers billow away to float aimlessly in the sky, marking the hard end of your heavenly beauty. The beauty of falling. He would plummet through the earth and do so with glee. He would smile, and tears of joy would water the tree that quivered inside him. Never again would he stand in the shackles of God. He would find that freedom he had never quite been able to conceptualize until this moment. He had never been able to understand why, if God was so good, Lucifer had decided to turn his back on him, not foolishly, but firmly, with anger. Why did he need to be pulled out of the fires of this nominal hell when they were warming his ice-cold body for the first time in years? It was right to turn away. It was right to run. With the gentle kiss of the devil still warm on his lips, he could taste the colors of reality with a mouth that had only ever tasted lies. And even if these were lies as well, weren't they better? Weren't the beautiful, soft, calming lies drawing him farther from the light just the perfect thing to finally let his weary body sleep? Plunge into the ground. Uncover the answers that were buried from sight for so many years, hidden in reflective pools of tears and whispered words that held no truth. He couldn't live with the people who didn't understand. He couldn't breathe the air that didn't acknowledge the horror of living in this world, of struggling to survive even when he had no right to. He would look God in the eyes, if God there was, and tell him that this was unbelievably wrong. Things made sense to him now more than they ever had before. His feet were resting on the terracotta tiles stretching before him. He sat in his open window, moonlight and bugs fluttering into it freely. How beautiful it was to open the window and not care what might come in. How beautiful it was to sit in the cool bath of night, feeling the moon calcify him and darkness hold him, singing a sad, distant song from the garden below, asking him to listen closer, to come to the edge, lean over just a little more. It was right to turn away. It was right to run. Why did everyone ask him, even people who did not know him, to keep facing the sunlight which bled him until he was cold and hateful? Why not let him die now? Die when he still had some form of himself unbroken in his mind. At least let him decide. This was why Luca had left. Those years, all those years when Heaven didn't know where he had gone or why, couldn't think why he was okay leaving him. He understood that tonight. Tears trembled on his lashes, tears both for the joy of finally taking in his first and last breath of freedom, and sadness, the sadness of the regret he knew he would feel, some part of him was feeling, the regret of leaving, the regret that he wasn't able to keep on living, that Luca would be alone. He had no one. The future Heaven only barely allowed himself to imagine for them slipping away as he let his tears slip, as he slipped off the windowsill into his room, as the pills slipped so easily into his palm. He swallowed the pills along with watered-down gulps of vodka, trying to make them go as quickly as he could, though there seemed to be so many. He took everything there was in the house. He moved almost in a trance, his hand floating from bottle to mouth to bottle to mouth to bottle to mouth. When all the pills were gone, he turned on the radio, looking for something with no piano, no piano, no piano. He lay down on the floor, rolling onto his back, staring at the dark ceiling and the deep-sea glow of the moon, tears sliding down his face as he waited. The room was full of soft, pensive music as Heaven's body became nothing more than another aspect of the another beautiful piece of furniture or art. It always had been. It wouldn't be until morning that the body would become a beacon, would appear crumpled and destroyed, and the flies would start to rise from the grass and soar through the open window, drinking the nutrients from his drying skin, crawling across the stickiness of his open eyes, crawling into his barely open mouth, looking for softer meat. Ants would come too, flooding up through the floorboards and unseen cracks in the walls, creating barracks along his arms, creeping up from the fingers and trekking up his body to sink into the holes the flies had begun to create in his exposed skin. A small collection of wasps found their way in too, bullying the flies for space on the corpse and feeding equally on human and insect. Eggs were laid in his skin, maggots were born. The sun trailed across the tips of his fingers, moving from white to golden to orange, and finally disappearing, the moon finding his body once again. He wouldn't be found the next day, or even the day after that. It wouldn't be until his body began to putrefy and swell, until it was unrecognizable as the person who had been named Heaven by his young, terrified mother, that a woman who came once a week to tend his roses would smell something horrible, would call the police screaming, describing a scene that she would never be able to forget for the rest of her life. All right, and then we go to chapter 7, which is back in Luca's perspective. 7, 1 week after the murder. Luca stood on the sidewalk outside of his apartment, his eyes fixed on the piercingly white structure on top of the hill. He began walking briskly towards it, taking him past homeless people sleeping among soggy pieces of cardboard in the doorways of buildings, past the underworld, a club he had been to on more than one long and weary night. He walked the reverse path to the one he had taken one day in March, 17 years old, holding only the carpet bag his mother had left him with, and dressed in the dull gray uniform of St. Raphael's School for Boys, cast aside by the school and the church, and banished to the streets of this gray and hazy town. He walked past the nice houses with their small, delicate gardens, and entered the cul-de-sac belonging to St. Raphael's and the church. He stared at the dark, wound-like circle of stained glass at the front of the church, at the spire and the high roof. Father Michael's little green car was parked by the liturgy offices. Luca cut across the cul-de-sac, making his way to the alley between the side of the church and the school office buildings, his feet crunching through the gravel and dust, a sound he hadn't heard in years, but had never forgotten. Behind the church, nestled against a waist-high chain-link fence, was a short oak tree, barely 8 feet tall, its roots clinging to the dirt of the hillside and holding it aloft above all the taller trees in the valley below. Luca had shown this tree to Heaven when he was 9, and they had met there every Thursday after Heaven's organ lessons at the church while he waited for the maestro to come pick him up. It was also the place, when Luca was 17 and Heaven was 15, that Heaven had leaned against the tree, and under the stony gaze of the gargoyle guarding the back door of the church, had kissed Luca, sending him down to the mercy of the town below, but also forever sealing their fate to one another. Facing away from the church, Luca could see the dotted white headstones of the graveyard where Heaven was buried below him. He turned his back on the graveyard and leaned against the tree, its overhanging branches framing the hulking mass of the church. He stared at the gargoyle, its twisting face looking out blankly all over the world. Had the gargoyle watched many lives pass by like his? Many children turn into adults, coming back to this tree and to this dusty lot to mourn over their disintegrating lives. "I'm sorry," Luca said, "that nothing has become of me." The church walls were flat and silent. The gargoyle whispered no consolation, nor even breathed with the magic Luca had seen in it as a child. The tree rustled in the breeze, though faintly, like it was a struggle even to move that much. Heaven and the maestro had both died, leaving Luca and Father Michael as the only original actors in this play, and they were confined to their distinct, independent lives, which held no point of convergence on the horizon, and likely never would again. Luca could see around him, all at once, nothing more than this small, empty lot, a large church which needed to be repainted, and a small tree with little significance even to a squirrel or a bird. This place, which had once been his home, was now dead and vacant, just as interchangeable as any foreign church or any foreign lot. He knelt down, placing his hands pointing towards the gargoyle. He rested his head on the grit and closed his eyes. "Forgive me," he whispered, his breath stirring the dust beneath his lips. Tears slipped from his eyes and wet the dryness of the ground. "Forgive me, I'm sorry." Whether the gargoyle's eyes turned slowly towards him, or it opened its mouth in a futile attempt to respond, Luca did not see. Whether Father Michael stood beneath the archway by the stone bench and watched the scene before him with a smile, his eyes dancing with devilish fire, Luca could not see. He saw only darkness and heard only the silence of God. Thank you.